Hey everybody, so in today's video we're going to take you through a process commonly referred to as twice turning, and we're going to take a log and cut it, rough it out into a bowl, let it dry, and then eventually end up with a finished bowl. So we're going to walk you through this process and how to do it, so let's go ahead and get started and head out to the backyard. So in order to get this log prepped, what we need to do is remove our pith, which is the part in the center here. And the reason we do this is cracks mainly start from the pith. So when you're turning a green bowl, you want to eliminate that, and that will eliminate most of the risk of cracking. So normally what we would do is make two different cuts like this and get rid of this pith part. Now we can save these parts, use them for boards if it's a bigger bowl, whatever you want. You might even be able to get two smaller bowls out of that if you're using a large log. But what we're gonna do is just cut this in half. Because this is such a small log, we're gonna basically turn both halves today, and we'll just end up turning the pith out. Now, like I mentioned, I cut this wood yesterday, and you can see we already have a pretty decent crack starting from the pith. So we're gonna orient our wood like this. I'm just gonna cut it straight down the middle, and then we'll go ahead and throw it on the lathe. If you get a bunch of logs and you're processing all your wood at once, as soon as you get your logs, you're gonna basically wanna cut this out to get rid of any cracks that might form, and then paint your ends. And then you can go ahead and turn the logs when you get to it. All right, now we have two halves of a log. So next what we'll do is go ahead and get some circles drawn and get our bowl cut out. So at this point, we've got pretty much the shape of what our bowl is going to be. It'll be slightly smaller than this since we don't go fully to the edges. But what I'm going to do now is just rough this out and knock these corners off with the chainsaw. If you have a really nice bandsaw that's big enough to do bowls like this with a good blade on it, then by all means do that. But I've found just knocking the corners off with a chainsaw works just fine, especially since this is green wood. It does turn fairly easy. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we've got our two bowl halves from the log we cut in half, and these are kind of a circle shape now. Doesn't really need to be perfect. Again, this is green wood. It turns very easy. Even though it is kind of an interrupted cut with some high spots, a nice sharp gouge, we'll go through this no problem. So what we're gonna do is just drill a hole in the center. I'm gonna be using the worm screw just on a chuck. That's how I like to do my roughing out. So we'll go ahead and get this drilled and get it thrown up on the lathe. So we've got the outside of our bowl roughed out and switched over on our chuck. Before we do the inside, we're going to talk about why we do a twice turned bowl. And the reason behind that is if we were to turn this right now to the final thickness, as the moisture leaves the wood, it's going to leave so fast that it's going to warp really bad and then crack. So to avoid that, what we're going to do is rough it out, which we've done the outside. Now we're going to do the inside, leaving ourselves about an inch of wall thickness. And over time, when this bowl loses its moisture, on the end grain, that's where the most moisture is going to leave. So we need to control that to avoid any cracking. But as this happens, our bowl is actually going to warp and kind of turn into an oval. So now it's important that we leave ourselves enough thickness to when we do warp into this oval, when we go to final turn it, we have enough wall thickness so we can reestablish our circle and make this an actual bowl. So we'll go ahead and throw this back on the lathe. Again, we're going to leave ourselves about an inch all the way around the bowl, and that's for drying purposes. Alright, so now that our bowl is roughed out in our first turning, what we need to do is seal the end grain because we do not want the moisture to leave this too fast. Again, if this leaves too fast, then our bowl is just going to crack. So what we're going to do is paint the end grain with a product called Anchor Seal. This is basically a water and wax mix. You can also use latex paint. I've heard people mix Elmer's glue and water together. But basically you just want something that's going to seal up the grain, and this is going to allow a little bit of water to go through it, but not a whole lot. So it's going to kind of control the rate in which this dries. So we're going to paint the end grain on the outside, and then we're going to paint the end grain on the inside as well. So now, just for kind of a fun little thing so we can compare, right now our bowl is at 8 inches and 3/8. So we'll see how much this warps. And then to see how much water we lose, we'll go ahead and throw this on a scale. And right now we're at about 915 grams. So we'll go ahead and get this ready to get dried, and we'll go from there. So now that we've got our bowls all painted up with Anchor Seal, what I've got here is a leaf bag which is full of the wood shavings from the bowls we turned. I roughed out quite a few today, so those are all in here. And we'll go ahead and add the one that we made this video about. And then we're just going to cover these with more wood shavings. Now the reason we're doing this is that, as we mentioned before, we want to try and control how fast the moisture leaves the wood. So by putting wet wood shavings into the bag, everything is kind of in a damp environment, so our bowl isn't just going to suddenly dry. Basically, everything in here is going to take a while to dry, which ensures that our bowl dries nice and slowly. So wood takes approximately 1 year per inch to dry, So since we roughed these out to about an inch thick, it's going to take about a year to dry. So what I'm going to do is put these in the bag, in the storage, and then in 6 months we're going to check on it. Alright, so we put our bowl in the bag of wood shavings back in June. It is now January, which means it's been 6 months. So we're going to go ahead and pull this out. At this point, a lot of the moisture has left the bowl nice and slow like we wanted. To get that last little bit out, we're going to actually take this out of the bag of wood shavings and just leave it out in the open air to get that last little bit of moisture. But since it's been 6 months, we'll go ahead and compare to what this was 6 months ago when it was wet. So we measured this bowl when we rough turned it, and it was 8 3/8 wide. Right now it is measuring 8 1/16, which means we have lost 5/16 due to drying and warpage. When we weighed our bowl, we were at 915 grams. We are now at 744, which means we have lost 171 grams in water weight. So like I said, we're going to keep this out of the shavings and just go ahead and put it on a shelf for the next probably 4 to 5 months, and then we'll go ahead and check it again. Welcome back, everybody. It is now June again, which means that our bowl has been drying for a year now. So throughout that year, we've had some pretty interesting things happen with this. First, we did develop some cracks, and they are actually in the ring of the wood. So these cracks aren't because of the drying process. This is just really more to do with this Honey Locust being very brittle. This is honestly not a great wood to work with. I've had a lot of problems with it, but this is what I have in my yard and I have to use, so that's what I'm going to use. So again, these cracks are not anything to do with our drying process. They're not through the pith, they're actually through the ring. We've got some ring separation there. So I've gone ahead and stabilized these already with some CA glue, so we can go ahead and move on to the turning of this bowl. So the other really interesting thing that happened is I went ahead and weighed this bowl, and when we started we were at 915 grams, and at the 6 month mark we were at 744 grams, which means we lost 170 grams of water weight. Now, when I recently weighed this again for this part of the video, our bowl is actually weighing 783 grams, which means that we've gained 40 grams somehow. And my only theory about this is when we took this out of the wood shavings and weighed it, it was winter, which is a very dry month. And now we are in the fairly beginning stages of summer where it's fairly humid. So the only thing I can think that happened here is obviously we gained a little bit of weight from our super glue, but that's not going to be very much. But I think what happened is as bowls kind of acclimatize to the different seasons, they will tend to warp a little bit and they will absorb or lose water depending on the season. So I think because it is now the humid months, we have actually gained a little bit of that water back. So not a big deal because like I said, this is a natural bowl, so it will kind of expand, contract, and gain and lose as the seasons go on. So let's get this on the lathe and we will go ahead and finish turning this. Alright, so I went ahead and let this bowl sit in the dehumidifier room for about 2 weeks after we roughed it out. And this is something I like to do because depending on the type of wood and the size of the bowl, as we do our final finishing and take a lot of that material off, over time the stress in the wood will kind of relax, and sometimes we'll end up with a warped bowl after we finish turn it. So this is running pretty true still, so we'll go ahead and sand this. What we're gonna do is use just a combination of a drill with a disc on it, and then we'll probably end up throwing the lathe in reverse and doing some hand sanding as well. I've gone ahead and finished sanding the bowl down to 220. Everything looks nice and feels good and is nice and smooth. And now what I've done is gone ahead and put this into a set of coal jaws so we can turn the bottom off this. Now on this particular bowl, this is going to be a salad bowl, so we're going to be doing a natural finish. Now if I was doing a more glossy or show type finish, I would have kept that in the chuck and put multiple coats on and then wet sanded it while turning, and then put the last coat on. If you want to see how I do that type of finish, check out part 4 of the segmented bowl tutorial. But like I said, since this is a salad bowl, we'll go ahead and turn the bottom off, and we're just going to dip this in a mineral oil all together. So like I said, this was going to be a food safe bowl, and we are doing a natural finish, which is going to be mineral oil. So what I have here is a large tub of mineral oil, and this is just really easy because we can just dunk our bowl in there and get everything nice and coated. And then we'll just set it up on the little drying rack I've got and let that drain off. So here we are from log to bowl 1 year later. I hope you guys liked this tutorial. If you did, please consider liking and commenting and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching.